one of the most mysterious cold cases of all time. And I know I say that a lot, but not only are the culprits suspicious, but the identity of the woman itself.
A remote Norwegian valley, a scorched body, no ID, no fingerprints, and not a single label on her clothes. For over 50 years, this has remained one of the most baffling cold cases in European history. The woman found in Isdalen, known only as the Isdal Woman, has haunted investigators, journalists, and spy hunters for decades. Why was she there? Who was she really? And why was her death covered in silence and secrecy? What you're about to hear isn't just a strange unsolved case. It's a tangled web of lies, codes, and buried truths. A body burned, but not forgotten. On a cold Sunday afternoon, November 29, 1970, a father and his two young daughters wandered off the marked trail in Norway's Isdalen Valley, a rugged, isolated region also known as Death Valley by the locals. The name wasn't just folklore. Historically, the steep valley had claimed the lives of many unfortunate hikers and was even associated with self-harm during the Middle Ages. But nothing could have prepared the family for what they stumbled upon that day. A woman's body, lying between the rocks, badly burned and horrifyingly out of place. The corpse was found wedged into a shallow depression beneath a rock outcrop. Her front was scorched beyond recognition, yet her back remained oddly untouched by fire. Her arms were raised in a boxer-like posture, a position common in burn victims. What disturbed investigators the most, though, was the arrangement of her belongings. Jewelry, a broken umbrella, 2 plastic bottles, rubber boots, and a wristwatch weren't on her body. They were carefully placed beside her, almost ceremonially. None of the items showed signs of a struggle or hasty discard, but they did show signs of something else: intention. When the police arrived at the scene, the first thing they noticed was the overwhelming smell of burnt flesh. But that was just the beginning. The labels on every piece of clothing had been meticulously removed. Even the bottles, likely intended to hold water or alcohol, had their labels scraped off. There was no wallet, no identification card, no driver's license. Nothing that could help reveal who she was or where she came from. The woman's face was unrecognizable due to the burns, and forensic testing would eventually estimate her age between 36 and 44 years old, contrary to the original assumption that she was in her late 20s. An autopsy revealed that the woman had ingested somewhere between 55 to 78 phenimal tablets, a strong barbiturate sleeping pill. Yet only part of the dose had been absorbed into her bloodstream before death, suggesting she was still alive and conscious at the time of the fire. Even more damning was the discovery of soot in her lungs, meaning she was breathing while she burned. There were also signs of petrol on and around her body, indicating that an accelerant had been used. In other words, this wasn't a case of someone lying down quietly to die. She had suffered. There was also an odd bruise on the right side of her neck, subtle but suspicious. And despite everything pointing to foul play, the police made an unexpected move. They ruled it a probable self-harm. The reasoning? The massive dose of sleeping pills seemed to suggest an intent to die. And without direct evidence of another person's involvement, the case was closed within just a few weeks. But not everyone was convinced. Even officers working the case expressed doubt behind closed doors. The terrain where she was found was difficult to reach, hardly the kind of place someone would choose to end their life. And if her goal was to die peacefully, why consume a huge dose of pills only to then set herself on fire? It made no sense. It was gruesome, painful, and contradictory. The contradictions didn't stop there. Just days later, investigators opened a locker at the Bergen train station and discovered 2 suitcases. Inside were items that didn't just raise eyebrows, they screamed conspiracy. Wigs, coded notes, multiple currencies, and a notepad filled with handwritten symbols. One of the most baffling cold cases in modern history had just become even more layered. What the police found next only deepened the mystery: 2 suitcases and a notepad full of secrets. Secrets in a suitcase. 3 days after the burned body was found in Isdalen Valley, police made a breakthrough that would transform the bizarre into the truly baffling. At the Bergen train station, they opened 2 unclaimed suitcases that had been sitting untouched in a public locker. A fingerprint on a pair of glasses confirmed the connection to the unknown woman in the valley. But the contents inside those suitcases would raise far more questions than they answered, and would form the backbone of one of Europe's most enduring criminal enigmas. The items were unlike anything local authorities had encountered before. There were wigs, multiple of them, clearly used for disguise. Several pairs of glasses were found, some with no prescription lenses at all. A comb and hairbrush, makeup, and toiletries were all present, but every single label on every item had been removed with painstaking care. The same obsessive erasure had been carried over from the clothes found on her body. Even a tube of eczema cream had its prescription label scratched off, hiding the name of the doctor and the patient. This wasn't just paranoia, it was calculated. There were currencies from various European countries, Norwegian and German marks, Belgian francs, British coins, and Swiss currency, all suggesting she had recently traveled extensively across Europe. But why so many currencies, and why go to such extraordinary lengths to conceal her identity? That question took on a darker tone when police discovered a notepad buried at the bottom of one suitcase, filled with strange alphanumeric codes. At first, the codes looked like random combinations of letters and numbers, but they weren't gibberish. After careful study, authorities realized the cryptic sequences aligned with hotel stays and travel dates. For instance, 030 BNI corresponded to her stay in Bergen from October 30th to November 5th. Other entries included shorthand like 022-028P for October 22nd to 28 in Paris. It became clear that this wasn't just someone on holiday, this was a person methodically tracking her movements across multiple cities, in a format that resembled spycraft. Another key clue came from a seemingly mundane item, a plastic bag from a shoe store over 130 miles away in Stavanger. The bag matched a style of rubber boots found with the woman's body. Investigators traveled to the shop, where they spoke to the owner's son, Rolf Rørtvedt. He not only remembered the woman vividly, he had sold her the very boots weeks earlier. She stood out, he said, well-dressed, medium height, with a round face and a strange scent that clung to her clothes. At the time, he couldn't place it. Later, he decided it was garlic. The trail led to a hotel in Stavanger, where the woman had registered under the name Fenella Lorch. But when police checked other hotels across Norway, they uncovered a stunning pattern. She had checked in under at least 8 different names. All were fake. Her handwriting, analyzed across the registration forms, matched across cities. She was using multiple aliases and traveling constantly. The common denominator? Each fake identity claimed she was from Belgium. This discovery shifted the investigation entirely. The case was no longer about identifying a woman, it was about unraveling the life of someone who had spent years hiding in plain sight. Her presence in cities like Oslo, Bergen, Stavanger, Paris, and Geneva suggested more than casual travel. She wasn't just avoiding being found, she was orchestrating her invisibility. Authorities now faced a chilling possibility: that the woman they found burned in the Norwegian wilderness may have been engaged in international espionage. Her suitcases weren't just personal luggage, they were a mobile toolkit of deception, complete with disguises, currencies, cover stories, and encoded records of her whereabouts. But her travel wasn't random. She had aliases, 8 of them, and each had a different background. A woman of many faces. As investigators unraveled the Isdal woman's movements through the cryptic clues in her suitcases and notepad, a stranger picture began to emerge. The woman found burned in Norway's Death Valley wasn't just traveling anonymously, she was living multiple lives. At least 8 of them. Hotel records, ferry logs, and train tickets revealed she had used names like Fenella Lorch, Claudia Tilt, Alexia Zarna Merchez, and more, each time registering with a new identity. The names, addresses, and birth dates were different, but all claimed a Belgian origin. Yet when authorities traced those identities, not one was real. The addresses didn't exist. The documents were fakes. What finally linked the aliases together was handwriting. Forensic specialists carefully analyzed the signatures across all hotel registration cards. The strokes, spacing, and formation of letters confirmed what police already suspected. These weren't multiple women. They were one woman, signing under different lives. The implications were staggering. This wasn't some random drifter or mentally unwell person playing dress-up. This was someone trained, someone deliberate, someone with a purpose. The staff at various hotels across Norway described a guest who was highly particular in her behavior. She often requested to change rooms, sometimes even on the same night she checked in. She preferred rooms with balconies. In at least one instance, she changed the room number herself, something so unusual that it stuck in the memory of hotel employees. Another common habit, placing a chair just outside her door before leaving the room, then bringing it back inside upon return. Some thought it was superstition. Others suspected she was trying to detect whether someone had entered her room while she was away. Language offered more intrigue. While she could speak some German and Flemish fluently and occasionally switched into French, she struggled with English, despite her later being possibly of North American origin based on isotopic and DNA analysis. This detail hinted at a facade. If she was indeed an English speaker, her accent and language errors may have been intentional. Yet another layer of deception. She always dressed impeccably. Witnesses consistently described her as elegant, even glamorous. Dark-haired, often wearing stylish clothing and heavy makeup, she stood out, but not in a way that seemed careless. Her appearance was calculated. One witness described her as having a Mediterranean or Middle Eastern complexion. Others simply called her exotic. That air of mystery extended to her scent. Some claimed she wore an unusually pungent perfume. Others said it smelled more like garlic. The odor was strong enough that it stayed in the memory of those who crossed her path. But what unnerved staff and guests the most was her company, or rather, the man she sometimes appeared with. Multiple reports indicated that she met with a tall, unidentified man in various locations during her final days in Bergen. Hotel workers observed the two dining together without speaking a word. In another instance, a maid entered the woman's room and found the man sitting silently in a chair while the woman stared out the window. There was no conversation, no affection, no warmth. The encounters were described as cold, frosty, and stiff. No one ever saw them exchange names. They may not have even used real ones. All of these signs, multiple passports, mysterious meetings, secretive habits, suggest a calculated effort to stay hidden, even as she moved conspicuously through Europe's cities. But what exactly was she doing? Who was she really meeting in those hotel rooms? And what business could possibly bring her to the steep, unforgiving terrain of Isdalen? Who was she meeting? And why did she end up in the one place known locally as the Valley of Death? Cold War shadows and spy games. In 1970, the world was frozen in the grip of Cold War tensions. Espionage, political assassinations, and secret arms deals played out across Europe's cities like scenes from a spy thriller. Norway, while not often seen as a major player, sat squarely on this shadowy chessboard. It shared a direct border with the Soviet Union in the far north, hosted NATO radar facilities, and was monitored closely by both Eastern and Western intelligence agencies. The idea that a burned woman in Bergen could be tied to international intrigue may once have sounded far-fetched, But the deeper investigators dug, the more real that possibility became. Just 3 years after the Isdal woman's death, Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, carried out a high-profile operation in Lillehammer, Norway. Agents mistakenly assassinated a Moroccan waiter they believed to be a Palestinian terrorist. It was a deadly error, but more importantly, it confirmed something chilling. Foreign intelligence agencies were conducting operations on Norwegian soil, and they were willing to slay. In the wake of the Lillehammer incident, the Isdal woman's case took on a darker hue. Had her death been another clandestine act, one that succeeded where Lillehammer failed? The woman had all the hallmarks of covert activity. She traveled under fake names. She meticulously concealed her identity. She carried wigs, non-prescription glasses, and used a personal code to record her movements. She visited not only cities in Norway, but international hubs tied to Cold War operations: Geneva, Paris, and Beirut. According to a BBC and NRK investigation decades later, several retired officers from the Bergen police claimed their inquiry into the woman's death was hampered, possibly blocked, by Norway's own intelligence services. Requests to follow leads abroad were allegedly denied. One officer later remarked, "It felt like something or someone didn't want us to dig deeper." A breakthrough came when an independent researcher connected her travel records to the movements of a controversial figure, François Genoud. A Swiss banker, Genoud was far more than just a financial magnate. He had strong Nazi ties, having met Adolf Hitler as a young man. After the war, he became one of the most enigmatic players in Europe's post-war underground. Genoud funneled large sums of money into Arab nationalist movements, particularly Palestinian militant groups. In 1970, the same year the Isdal woman died, Genoud was actively working with Wadi Haddad, a Palestinian operative responsible for airplane hijackings and terror attacks abroad. What makes this connection even more chilling is geography. Genoud was documented to be in Paris in late June 1970. So was the Isdal woman. Police deciphered her coded notes, and one line referenced a stay in Paris that directly overlapped with Genoud's. She stayed under the alias Vera Schlosseneck in 2 different Paris hotels, while Genoud met secretly with Haddad, disguised in a wig. According to his own biography, Genoud didn't just know Haddad. They were very close. Could the Isdal woman have been a courier, a messenger, or even a double agent? Her presence in Geneva and Paris, 2 cities where Genoud operated freely, raises red flags. Her multi-currency stash, multiple false passports, and precise travel coding suggests something more structured than mere wanderlust. Some believe she may have been used by Genoud and his network for intelligence gathering or covert communication. Others suspect she may have known too much, becoming a liability in a world where secrets are currency and silence is often permanent. And yet, it's possible her death wasn't just an elimination. The brutality of her end, the fire, the exposure, the bizarre staging, may have been more than disposal. It might have been a warning, a signal. In Cold War intelligence, messages are often delivered not through words, but through bodies, burned bodies. If she was indeed a covert operative, her death may not have been an accident, or even just a slaying. It could have been a geopolitical warning, the Paris-Geneva connection. For years, the Isdal woman was seen as a Norwegian enigma, her final days confined to the misty valleys of Bergen. But once police began decoding the cryptic entries in her notepad and cross-referencing hotel records across Europe, a wider picture formed. She wasn't just drifting through Scandinavia. She had been in Paris, Geneva, and even Beirut, cities buzzing with intelligence activity in the Cold War era. Her coded itinerary, scribbled in blue ink and initially indecipherable, hinted at a broader mission. And what it revealed would cast an entirely new light on her story. police records show that in late October 1970, just weeks before her death, the Isdal Woman stayed in Paris under the alias Vera Schlosseneck. She checked into not one, but two hotels, including the Altona and the Calais, which were budget-friendly spots often used by travelers looking to avoid attention. The dates recorded in her coded notes matched exactly with those hotel stays. 022-028 signified her time in Paris from October 22nd to October 28th. But her trip to the French capital wasn't an isolated visit. It was the second time she'd been there that year. Another cryptic entry from her notes, J22PJ3, appears to mark a stay in Paris from June 22nd to July 3rd. That's where the connection to a much darker web of global events begins to emerge. During that same June period, two other figures were present in Paris: François Genoud and Wadi Haddad. Genoud, a far-right Swiss banker with deep Nazi affiliations, had transformed himself into a behind-the-scenes power broker. He financed Palestinian nationalist movements, including the faction led by Haddad, a shadowy figure responsible for several plane hijackings and linked to the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. In a rare biographical interview, Genoud confirmed that he and Haddad had met in Paris on June 26, 1970, right in the middle of the Isdal Woman's stay. Could this all be coincidence? Possibly, but it would be a stretch, especially since Genoud described Haddad as arriving in disguise, wearing a wig, and using a false identity, techniques eerily mirrored in the Isdal Woman's own travel habits. She too carried wigs, glasses, and falsified papers. She too was in Paris under an alias, logging her movements in secret codes. And both she and Genoud would later turn up connected, indirectly or otherwise, to Geneva, the quiet city with a violent undercurrent. Among the strange items found in her suitcase was a sewing kit from the Hotel Regina in Geneva, a posh hotel on the lakeside. She also carried Swiss francs, despite having no recorded reason to visit the country unless one accounted for espionage. Genoud, meanwhile, ran his private banking operation from Geneva and was a central figure in arms financing for Palestinian causes. He had the money, the access, and the global reach to facilitate covert missions across Europe. And Haddad? He had the targets. Which begs the question, what was the Isdal Woman's real role? If she was acting as a spy, courier, or go-between, was she transporting something more than just information? A theory has emerged, one more disturbing than most. In 1970, the same year she died, Israel secretly secured a shipment of heavy water from Norway. Heavy water is a rare and vital component in nuclear reactors and potentially nuclear weapons. Could the Isdal Woman have been involved in monitoring or sabotaging that shipment? Was she trying to leak the story? Or was she being used as a pawn in a game far bigger than herself? Her presence in both Geneva and Paris, at the exact same time as two key players in a geopolitical arms triangle, suggests she was closer to the heart of something massive. But what if she wasn't just there to spy? What if she was involved in something nuclear? Heavy water, hidden motives. On the surface, Norway appeared to be a neutral bystander in the Great Cold War standoff between East and West. But beneath the image of Nordic calm, the country was home to something far more volatile: heavy water, a critical component in nuclear reactor technology. In 1970, the same year the Isdal Woman was found burned in a remote valley, Norway covertly arranged to supply Israel with a shipment of this valuable substance. Although the agreement originally called for 5 metric tons, only one was ultimately delivered. The entire deal remained hidden from the public for years. Heavy water isn't just technical jargon. It's a key ingredient in the nuclear fission process, both for energy and weapons production. By supplying even a small quantity, Norway placed itself squarely within the web of global nuclear politics, and possibly espionage. The Israeli reactor at Dimona, shrouded in secrecy, was allegedly capable of developing nuclear weapons. And that 1-ton delivery, made with a quiet handshake and a sealed shipment, may have set off alarms among Israel's adversaries. The question is, did someone try to intervene? That's where the Isdal woman re-enters the picture, not as a victim of happenstance, but as a potential participant in a mission tied directly to the nuclear supply chain. Her pattern of travel between Norway, Paris, Geneva, and Beirut mirrors the movement of intelligence operatives monitoring or interfering with arms deals. She had the tools, wigs, disguises, aliases. She had the methods, coded notes, multiple currencies, a careful erasure of her identity. But more importantly, she may have had a purpose. Some now believe she was acting as a courier, an observer, or even a whistleblower, tracking the movement of heavy water from Norway to Israel. If that was true, then her life was more than just mysterious. It was dangerous. In a world where exposure could jeopardize national strategies or international arms transfers, a single woman with the wrong knowledge could easily be deemed expendable. Mossad, Israel's foreign intelligence agency, had already proven its reach in Norway with the Lillehammer operation in 1973, when its agents assassinated a man they mistakenly believed was connected to a terrorist plot. If Mossad thought the Isdal woman was about to leak sensitive information, especially regarding Israel's nuclear program, they may have acted preemptively. But the theory doesn't stop there. Others argue that it wasn't Mossad who silenced her, but Palestinian militants. If she had previously worked with groups like the PFLP or had contact with financiers like François Genoux and Wadi Haddad, and then changed sides or failed to deliver on a promise, she may have been marked as a defector. In the world of shadow politics, betrayal is not forgiven. Some speculate she was lured to Bergen under the guise of a final meeting, sedated with sleeping pills, and executed. Her body, arranged and burned, wasn't just discarded, it was staged. A warning, perhaps, to others in her line of work. It's impossible to ignore how methodically her past was erased. Every label cut away, every identifying item scratched off. Her belongings left with intention, her aliases too scattered to follow. This wasn't the work of a panicked slayer. It was clean, cold, professional, which makes the violence of her death, the fire, the bruise, the poison, all the more unnerving. It felt theatrical. It felt like a message. Whether she was Israeli, Palestinian, European, or American, one truth emerges clearly. She knew something that couldn't be allowed to leave Isdalen alive. Maybe it was names. Maybe it was a meeting. Maybe it was the secret shipment of 1 ton of heavy water meant for a reactor half a continent away. Whichever side she was on, one thing's clear. She knew something worth slaying for. DNA, dead ends, and new hope. For decades, the Isdal woman existed only in fragments, burned remains, a suitcase of secrets, and a trail of aliases that led nowhere. Her true identity was a blank line in every police report, every news article, every whispered theory. But in 2017, nearly half a century after her death, science took a bold step toward breaking the silence. For the first time, advanced forensic methods were applied to the preserved remains, and what they revealed was both surprising and promising. Her estimated age at the time of death had long been believed to be between 25 and 30 years old. But new testing changed that. Using cutting-edge molecular techniques, specifically the transformation of aspartic acid in dental collagen, experts re-estimated her age to be between 36 and 44. That alone significantly altered the profile investigators had constructed. This wasn't a young runaway or lost tourist. She was likely a mature woman, experienced, and possibly deeply entrenched in the clandestine world she appeared to inhabit. Then came isotope testing. By analyzing the isotopic signatures in her teeth, which reflect the geology of the region where a person grows up, through the water they drink, Scientists narrowed down her childhood origin to the border region between France and Germany. This aligned with earlier suspicions from linguistic experts who noted her use of awkward German phrases and outdated terms associated with that region, like Brüssel Kreisleitung, a phrase from Nazi-occupied Belgium. The isotopes told a silent truth. She had spent her formative years somewhere in the Rhine Valley. DNA analysis took things even further. While her full genome couldn't be reconstructed due to partial degradation, enough was preserved to determine her ancestry. The results were vague but intriguing. She was of European descent, possibly Western European, but some genetic markers hinted at North American lineage, leading to a burst of speculation. Could she have been born in Europe and raised in North America? Or was her lineage simply a blend of migratory roots? The uncertainty was maddening, but it meant one crucial thing. Her DNA could lead to a match, if only it was entered into the right database. This is where bureaucracy hit a wall. Although her DNA profile was submitted to Interpol, it returned no direct hits, no matching identities, no relatives. But unlike the US, where investigators have used private genealogical databases to crack decades-old cold cases, Norwegian law forbids the use of commercial services like GED Match or 23andMe for police investigations. That policy has left her DNA essentially locked in a vault, technically usable, but functionally isolated. Ironically, Norway is now watching as other nations solve long, cold mysteries using exactly the kind of technology it's reluctant to embrace. In Sweden, for example, a double homicide was solved using familial matching and private DNA databases. In the US, the Golden State Slayer was unmasked after 40 years with a distant relative's profile. It only takes one match, even a third cousin, to begin unspooling the threads of a hidden identity. Recently, pressure has begun to mount. Journalists, genetic researchers, and even retired detectives have urged Norwegian authorities to reconsider their stance, at least in exceptional cases like this. Behind closed doors, debates continue about ethics, privacy, and the implications of using private genetic data. But time isn't on their side. The further we get from 1970, the more witnesses die, memories fade, and evidence disappears. Yet the strange twist is this: her DNA is ready. Her teeth and organ samples, once thought lost, were rediscovered in a dusty hospital warehouse. The technology exists. The profile is built. All that's missing is permission. One green light, one shared database, one family member who submits a DNA test. The Isdal Woman was more than a mystery. She was a ghost from the Cold War, a puzzle of burnt flesh and missing truths. But with every new lead, we move one step closer to finally knowing her name, her mission, and her slayer. Was she a spy, a scapegoat, or someone too dangerous to live? Let us know what you think in the comments. If you're fascinated by history's most chilling unsolved cases, hit that like button, subscribe, and don't miss our next video. It could change everything you think you know.